Good afternoon, friends. I'd like to welcome you today to What's in Tegan's Storage Locker. It's the show that dares to ask the question, just what is in my storage locker? The answer today, as pretty much every day, it's comic books. I have many comic books that I bought as a child and later. And we just go through them. I grab a pile that look interesting and, well, he had just been sleeping, so of course I start talking, and he wakes up and heads right over. You make a beeline to see what's happening, didn't you? Yes. He was quiet for most of the last episode I recorded. I usually record a couple of these in a bunch. And he's usually pretty quiet for the second one if he has some energy during the filming of the first one. So we'll see. Let's get started with an issue of X-Man. My goodness, yes. X-Man lasted a long time. Gotta understand, if you were in the X-Men books, you know, they had you. They had you in for a penny, in for a pound with these. So for my sins, I followed X-Man. It usually had decent art for the time. This is a Roger Cruz cover. I remember liking Roger Cruz's work at the time. Definitely in the mold of, what Joe Madureira had started at the company. He was, taken for Joe Madureira in certain circumstances, shall we say. Learn to draw the Marvel way, according to, is this a CD-ROM? Oh, I guess it's just a book. But why is it? Oh, there's just a computer there. I don't know. Is this a book or a CD-ROM? I can't tell. So, double size, Mutant Milestone. They were saying that was their big anniversary issue slogan for a while there. A Mutant Milestone, giant size, 25th issue. And what that means is that the Age of Apocalypse was 2 years ago. This guy had, for better or for worse, been swimming on his own power for all this time, going more or less in circles. And, so this is about Madeline Pryor and Jean Grey. And, I do not particularly care for Jean Grey. I'll be circumspect. I've read many comics, books Jean Grey is in, enough for me to formulate an opinion of her as a person and a character, and she's not my favorite. I much prefer Madeline Pryor. I will buy a comic book because Madeline Pryor is in it, even though this is the beginning of the period where Madeline Pryor didn't make any sense. She'd been dead for a while. After the end of Inferno, she died. And then she came back in the pages of X-Man to have, how do I put this? It's not technically incestuous because they're both clones of people who are blood related. It's a very thin thread, but there's this, I dare say, sexual tension between Madeline Pryor and X-Man for the whole of her appearance in this book. And it was really quite a thing to see because they never really tamped it down. There was almost a love triangle between Madeline Pryor, this character here, Threnody, who was friend confidant to Nate Gray, because he didn't have much of a supporting cast. It was like Threnody, Spider-Man inexplicably showed up a fair amount of times, and he showed up in Spider-Man's book. Their being actual friends was a plot element for a good couple of years, and then it hasn't been referenced again. But they were actually pretty good as buddies. Terry Kavanagh, I think he wrote much of the run of this. That it was, as readable as it is, considering it kind of went in circles, you know, and had decent art. Roger Cruz with Casey Jones. Yeah, more Casey Jones work in the 90s. You know, maybe it's just because the early 2000s is when I first took notice of him. I think of him as being a 2000s guy, but he was working all the way back then. Bud LaRose and Jason Martin inkers. And they were already using Richard Starkings and Comicraft for all the lettering. This same month as the one we pulled the other day. So, yeah. They're referencing, this is a bunch of exposition. It's an X-Men book where tertiary characters are sitting around having conversations. So Madeline Pryor and Threnody just get to exposit for a while. I never quite figured out why the Threnody had these, I don't know what, it's like she's got a telephone stuck to her head or something. Never quite figured out what that was. Maybe they were a thing. Oh, okay, they're explaining them. These are Sinister's tools so that her powers don't get out of control. Okay, I was joking about them. And then they literally explain them on the next page. Couldn't have planned that one better. So there's some sort of, she unleashes Threnity's powers. She had like these death powers, and she was really bummed out about it because it just meant tragedy for her, and she was taken for a villain. So Madeline Pryor does something to her, and Cable, and this is, I guess, when Alex Summers was in his villain-ish. Oh, wow, there's Cable with his St. Christopher medal on in the shower, it looks like. Didn't need to know that about you, Cable. So he's just, and he's not wearing the same uniform he wore that for a good couple of years. That was his costume, more or less, but he's wearing more or less normal people clothes, which the X-Men did a fair amount during this period. For this, that, or the other thing. That's a nice couple pages. This actually looks a little bit more like Casey Jones, if I had to guess. I say it looks really nice. I always like Casey Jones' work. He seemed like someone who really came up in Brett Blevin's wake. And very solid. Oh, that's nice. See, he knows how to draw. That's a nice angle on her chin there. Not an easy angle to draw. So here's just a sort of a symbolic recreating of sad things in Madeline Pryor's life. The reason why she hates Jean Grey, which, you know, straight up. You know, the one good thing that came out of that whole misbegotten dark web thing was basically seeing Jean Grey and Peter Parker presented with the exact same choice at the end of that story. And they make a different choice. And Jean Grey is a complete sucker, but, you know, it gets rid of the problem. But I thought Spider-Man was more reasonable, actually. I've already given you my opinion on Jean Grey. I think, you know, anything Madeline wants to do, she is completely and 100% entitled. If she wants to have a weird thing with her, the clone of her son from another dimension, who are we? Who are we to throw stones? I have seen weirder anime. Oh, it's a Bob Harris editorial profile. Yeah. Well, you see what the little man thought of that. 2099 World of Tomorrow is the hot choice. 2099 World of Tomorrow was the life raft that they put all of the 2099 characters in after everything else had been canceled, and it lasted 8 issues. And then it still had to be wrapped up in a one-shot a couple years later. Or I think it was a couple years. Maybe it wasn't a year. So, you know, both 2099 and the New Universe sort of... 2099 lasted like twice as long, just about. But it still staggered to the stop. They're talking about decorating their people's offices in the bullpen. The office of editor James Felder is adorned with a charming plastic Casper the Ghost lamp. Well, there you go. That's interesting. What else is on? Oh, yeah, they're talking about their... I think I mentioned before, they do not have the files for these early Marvel Online comic strips. If you have these, if you save these, you should actually get in touch with someone at Marvel because they are lost. They are lost media. They do not have these for their own library. Weird how stuff from the late 90s is already gone. That was online. Yeah, so this is the same month as that issue of Captain America I looked at in the other video. There's 2099 World of Tomorrow number 7. Man, they were just bringing in anyone off the street to work on that thing. 5 issues into Peter Milligan and Mike Deodato's Elektra. Gladiator Supreme. Interesting sort of oddball crossover there. Keith Giffen and Andy Smith. As I guess if you're going to see anyone on a title like that. They're still doing the Devil's Reign crossover between Top Cow and Marvel. James DeMatteis is back on Spectacular Spider-Man with Luke Ross, which is kind of an interesting run. There's the art and the writing maybe don't quite completely 100% fit together, but it's interesting for that. Larry Hama is on his very tail end of his Wolverine run. He was on that book. He wasn't on that book for as long as he was on G.I. Joe, but he was on that book for like 7 or 8 years. John Francis Moore is well into his run on X-Force. Oh, there's a Jimmy Chung issue of X-Men Unlimited, written by Terry Kavanagh. More Star Trek. Dan Abnett working on it. Patrick Zurcher. More, well, Dan Abnett was doing of course you could get Dan Abnett doing your sci-fi comics. Ian Edgington and him writing both of these. Mark Buckingham. See, now that's on the Star Trek Unlimited book, which would have been I don't even remember seeing a copy, would have been the quarterly book that might very well have had more interesting creators on it. That's something to look for. Don't usually come across Star Trek books in quarter bins. Maybe I'll start looking out for those. Interesting aesthetic in comics, very, every Star Trek purposefully a little bit square in comic books, and yet, the fans like them. And now I'd say that Star Wars is really square. Their books are really samey on the stands, just straight up. They have a very definite house style for those Star Wars books, and it keeps me away. I don't necessarily. I pick up the new Star Wars books, and they all look the same to me. I guess that's what they're going for. And there's Madeline Pryor. There's the reason I was buying the book. Madeline Pryor. Why did you buy X-Man for so long? Well, because Madeline Pryor was in it. And so it's always them having difficulties. And there's Madeline Pryor lashing out at Nate Gray. Oh, and he's just being kind of a doof because he never made good decisions about literally anything. That's kind of what he did, was make bad decisions. Yeah, because what he did was he was the one who brought her back to life. When this was really, they dragged it out for too long, and it ended up being he gave her life when he came to this world. He sort of gave this character new body and new life with his psychic powers. And then, but then she's like, well, you resurrected me, but like I'm not going anywhere. And she is still powerful enough that she can basically just, flip the bird, figuratively speaking, to Nate and Jean Grey. But I do wish you were my mother. I wish I could have been. Yeah, well, you weren't. You don't owe this man anything. Trust me. He's Spider-Man's problem. Let Spider-Man deal with Nate Gray. And here's the same tile floor that was showing up in all the Bacalo and Buckingham books, both of them. Say that 3 times fast. Next, The Journey Back to Muir. Wonderful. Muir Isle. Moira McTaggart. If I ever see another comic book with Moira McTaggart in it, it will be too soon. I tell you what. Olaf Beamer. Olaf Beamer was into X-Man, so I guess it had to have something going for it. He's someone else you saw a lot around this time. I don't recognize any of the other names. You know, not every comic can have a Joey Marchese letter. And here's another ad for that same story. I don't remember this at all. Every now and again, every couple of years, it seemed like they did they do a movie about something bad happening on a plane. I guess it's about time for them to do a movie about the door falling off a plane, which is a topical reference that I don't know if it'll make any sense if you're watching this a year from now. Remember that was a thing, all the doors were falling off of planes? I'm sure we have bigger fish to fry at this point. All right. Here's a fun one. Eclipso, The Darkness Within, #1. I did not pay. I think I paid $0.25 for this. So I wasn't really committed to the Eclipso saga. But I picked up a few bits and pieces of it, mostly in the quarter and dollar boxes over the year. But because they usually got good people to do the annuals during this time. Even Bloodlines. Bloodlines is the one they did in the year after they did Eclipso. Eclipso, I think, was a bit of a success. And that maybe emboldened them to go bigger for Bloodlines. Plus, it was just the general tendency in the industry. It was a good year for DC. It was a good year for everyone. But, there were just way too many of them, and no one liked the gimmick. Eclipso, I think people were more kindly disposed to it. And because it was a pretty decent story. It was built around Keith Giffen, more or less, rehabbing the Eclipso character, making him threatening for the 90s. And he was working with Bart Sears on pencils here. And, Bart Sears was mostly a DC guy at the time, although he did a lot of work for Wizard. He did some pieces for Wizard under the name Whitman, if I'm recalling correctly. But he was about as hot as, DC got at the time. He did some of their Justice League books, and I always liked his stuff. He wasn't like a favorite, but he definitely understands his fundamentals. He understands anatomy really well. His pages don't look like anyone else, and that makes him interesting to me, at least a little bit. This is also, you can tell, I want to say maybe the newsstand version of this, or maybe a second printing, because the fact is, a real copy of this should have a little plastic gem stuck to the cover, which was their gimmick for this, and it made the comic very difficult to store. This does not have the plastic gem, meaning I don't have to worry about it putting an indentation in the next 3 comics in the box. What are you doing? Do you see what I have to deal with? He just scampers around like he owns the place. Krusty's Funhouse. I think we saw an ad for that not long ago. Just slightly off model compared to what it is today. But they've stayed remarkably consistent for all that. See, this is nice. This is a nice page. It's, Bruce, whatever his name is, the other half of Eclipso, trekking through the jungle for some reason or another. So and they're seeing various tribes people from some, is this Darkest Africa? Oh, come on. In any event, it's there you go. There's a giant black diamond, just like the one Eclipso has. Cool world. There's a strange one for you. Brad Pitt was in that. Gabriel Byrne, Kim Basinger. Solid cast. So where was I? I was just waylaid by a small animal, and I had to go point the laser pointer around in the room. I would think I was looking at the Cool World ad and reflecting on the fact that even though it's a Ralph Bakshi film with an excellent cast, no one has good things to say about it in hindsight. I don't think it was a real undiscovered gem there, because I remember at the time not really knowing what to make of it. So they find the diamond. It does. Oh wait, no. This is a flashback. This is a flashback to them first finding the diamond, and then they take it back to the West, and they have it chopped up and made into diamonds. And so that's how, oh, that's a nice looking spread right there. So I remember for a while, before the Justice League was on the moon, the big deal was Eclipso had a mansion, this big mansion on the moon, which actually looks really cool. This is a nice looking spread, especially with this color hold in the back. Oh, there's Valor, Mon-El, who was stuck in the 20th century for a while. I don't think that was a particularly popular status quo, because he did not stick around for very long in that capacity. But they were sort of treating him like a second Superman for a while there in terms of what he could do, which, I mean, in a very technical way of speaking, is. Oh, see, that's clever. That's what counts for clever in a Nintendo ad. In 1992, yes, 1992. Oh, and Valor stumbles upon the guy. Yep, there he is, Mr. Eclipso. He's the guy who possesses you with those diamonds. You get one of those diamonds, and what was being done here was this guy. He's an old Silver Age villain. And they needed to brush the cobwebs off him and make him a threat in the early 90s. And they actually did a pretty good job with that, because I think this was a fairly well-received story. And they spun off an Eclipso book. There's even an Eclipso book crossing over with Bloodline. So, you know, two crossovers crossing over. And they basically just made a summer gimmick out of him going around and possessing all these different characters. He actually, I think he possesses Superman at some point. He possesses Black Canary, I know. A bunch of the superheroes get possessed. Yeah, so by the end of it, he's assembled an army full of superheroes that he controls, and he's doing something. This is who I was thinking. Bruce Gordon, that's his name. He's the guy who was associated, the gimmick was that he was Eclipso. Eclipso was like a spirit, an evil spirit in his body or something. If I hadn't been scratched by that diamond, Eclipso never would have existed. And I think one of the things this story does is essentially establishes that that's not true. That Eclipso was around for a long time before this guy was around. He just happened to be the recipient of the first Eclipso possession of the modern era, shall we say. Oh, there's that checkerboard again. Very popular in the 90s. So we're in exposition and doing something or other, and oh, here's a guy who's just, he's got his face eclipsed, and that's how you know he's turned evil. And he's doing evil business. Another black diamond. Yep. So what are you doing? Very early 90s fashion. Still, you know, more or less what people were wearing in the late 80s. Yeah, see, this is from Layouts by Giffen. By the way, I realize I didn't... is it on the... Big establishment, yeah. So it's Giffen. What are you doing? Giffen co-plotting with Robert Lord Fleming, who was a common collaborator of his in the period. And he's doing breakdowns as well for Sears. And then he's got two inkers, well, there's a large comic book, Randy Elliott and Mark Pennington, Gaspar Lederer, who was at DC for a long time. But anyway, you see, this is Keith Giffen. It reads absolutely perfect. You know what is happening at all times in this comic book. So he takes it to a jeweler. So we get to see the jewelers examining the black diamond. Oh, and apparently all these jewelers know the lore. Uh-oh. There's some guy, he's eclipsed, and he's looking for the creeper. The creeper? Man, we're going deep on that one. Hello. Are you just going to... You can just sit there. If you just sit there without interfering with what I'm doing, that's fine. Can you do that? So, well, we get a 2-page spread here. Creepers rarely looked so good. I want to say this was during one of their periodic attempts to sell him. He had a book in the mid-90s, I know. Interesting book in the 90s. You know, Bart Sears was definitely one for putting lots of lines all over the place. But it's fundamentally, I mean, not just with the layouts, but fundamentally it's really solid. American Comics and Entertainment ad. What was hot? Oh, Batman Returns was hot. And this was a DC book, so the DC books were at the top of the ad here. But this was the same month as Spawn 1 and 2. Spectacular Spider-Man 189, so they were celebrating the 30th anniversary of Spider-Man already. What are we doing? What are you doing? I didn't even remember what I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted. You're just not going to light up, are you? Oh, he's going to look out the window. Yes, lots of interesting things happening out the window. All right, oh, so this is impeccably told. Reads perfectly. You know that the creeper's getting the tar kicked out of him. Nice. Nice layouts. Very dynamic. And there we go. The guy who got the diamond to the creeper is abandoned. And the creeper is the first hero to be compromised by Eclipso. The creeper is a loner and considered deranged. Therefore, he was a perfect test case. If he'd eluded my grasp, who would have believed his story? As it is, I've released my hold on that buffoonish survivalist, thereby eliminating the one remaining eyewitness to this entire incident. And he's just sort of schlumping around his moon base. He's got some sort of plan to plunge the world into eternal darkness. Well, good on him. And that's a nice little bit there. What is he wearing here? I don't remember people wearing a lot of shirts like that. It's an interesting one. People talking. They're looking for something. Beep, beep. Oh, they're at the Metropolis Mall. Eclipso is summoned by feelings of rage and revenge. What? Oh, that's cool. What are you doing? I'm trying to look at a comic book. You know, you could just be a good cat and sit here in my lap while I work. That doesn't seem to be high on your priority list. I'm sorry. All right. Well, there's Clark Kent. Oh, that's a ripped Superman. Look at that. There aren't even names for those muscle groups. Oh, Batman Returns, official collector's magazines. Yeah, they really rolled out the red carpet merchandising-wise for a movie that it didn't fail. It wasn't a failure. It still was an immensely successful movie by any standard other than the fact that the first had really been a cultural phenomenon. All right. So he's after Superman. That's what he's doing. So you get to see Superman fight this big purple dude, not Grimace. I've got to find that little boy. What, does the little boy have the diamond? So this guy's starting to panic because Eclipso's up to something. He maybe doesn't have the whole story yet, but he's the guy who hates Eclipso more than anyone. So it's his job to figure out what's going wrong here. And he's already, just after this one issue, Eclipso's already claimed those two guys. And to be continued in Man of Steel Annual #1 and in other DC annuals throughout the summer. Oh, wow. The original Frankenweenie. And there you go. Available everywhere. Produced by Bob Ezrin, so you can't say they weren't at least giving it the old college try. All right. How about we finish what we started the other day? This is the second half of the Spider-Man story a couple videos ago with him versus Firelord. So we got a Ron Lim cover on Marvel Tales number 280 here. That's a nice cover. I like this cover better than the first Ron Lim cover they were doing. Or for the first half of this story. Maybe even didn't need the little caption down there. I think it kind of speaks for itself there. So, Tom DeFalco and Ron Frenz still writing. Bob McLeod over finished art. Always made everyone look good. Excellent inker. This is still during the Jim Owsley period editing, which, you know, had a rather ignominious by common consent ending. Huffy. Oh, these shocks in them. All right, so Firelord is still blazing around the city. He's mad. He's angry. Spider-Man, though, he knows he's got to do something. He knows that this guy's mad, and it's kind of, you know, down on him to do it. This is nuts. What are you doing? I have my own Firelord to deal with. See, he acts like he wants to play, and then when I get up to go play with him, he just goes and looks out the window. So I don't know. He's sending me mixed signals is what he's doing. And I'm sure he's going to try to disrupt the proceedings again here. But Spider-Man is fighting Firelord. And so we get to see Ron Frenz choreograph a fight in the air above, you know, tall buildings in Manhattan. And it's told perfectly. It scans. You can understand what's going on. He ends up breaking a window and having to bounce through an office building with Firelord hot on his heels. The people back home will never believe this. Win a Sonic Spinball game. Man, I have to admit, I didn't necessarily know Sonic was going to be one of the guys to stick around, but he has definitely stuck around. Got Idris Elba to do a Sonic thing. How crazy is that? Oh, Catherine Cushing. I didn't realize that's probably when she was introduced then. This is back when the Bugle was still more or less in its classic form as a newspaper where all of the supporting cast worked. The new Nickelodeon videos. Definitely try these at home. So the early episodes of Doug, Rugrats, and Snick. I don't remember Snick. That was other thing. I think that was something else. Ren and Stimpy. There you go. Ren and Stimpy was probably, at that point, Ren and Stimpy had a long run, and it probably had not started that long ago when this comic was printed. Oh, there you go. She's there's your cracking a cigar in half. I like the cut of her jib. She should have her own book. I'd buy a Catherine Cushion editor book. Oh, Grand Central Terminal, so you get to see him Ron Frenz drawing some real architecture. Oh, that's nice. That is nice. Oh, I love that. Love this sequence where they're chasing each other through the city. And then he gets him down into the subway because he figures he might have an advantage in close quarters because Spider-Man always has an advantage in close quarters. So they end up on the Bronx Expressway. Or not Express, the Bronx Express. Oh, and here are the Avengers. Oh, takes us over to what's happening in Avengers 258. But then something comes over the radio from the police department. Firelord's on a rampage. Yeah. Oh, and here's Spider-Man on the train. He has to stop the train. Very classic Spider-Man setup. The tracks are on fire. We're all going to die. Not if Spider-Man has anything to say about it. So... Oh, so I guess the emergency brake's already kicked in. So goes to, there just happens to be a demolition in town that day. So he goes to the demolition crew, and he's like, hey, I need to lure a guy into this building, so just, give us some time. We can't blow the building with people in there. Out of my way, you wimps. Spider-Man's counting on us, and I ain't going to let him down. See, that's the thing. He drops a building on Firelord. That makes sense. Admittedly, that there just happens to be a building about to be demolished. You know, I'll give the story that is the one coincidence too far for that one. But it makes sense that is something that you would throw at Firelord, and that he would probably start getting, this is the logic of the story, you drop a building on him and you chase him through town, he's probably going to at least get a little winded. And what he does is Spider-Man tricks him into blowing up a gas station. You're thinking, how much of this very expensive damage was your fault, Spider-Man? Well, I don't know if you want a good answer to that. Scrack-a-boom. Yeah, that's a nice half page there. Totaled over a square block of abandoned housing. Good that you just happen to know. And, thing is, that's still not going to knock him out. So he has to just bounce around and keep hitting him. I'm just too stubborn to know when to quit. I'll keep on coming back, keep fighting until I find a way to beat you. And finally, he knocks him senseless because he dropped a building and he blew up a gas station on him, which... Firelord is out cold. From what I saw at the end of the Donnybrook, he couldn't lay a hand on you. Well, I'm just lucky, I guess. Real lucky. See, I don't have a problem with it as written. Because I read the handbooks. I know that Firelord isn't quite as powerful as the Silver Surfer. I know that the Silver Surfer could completely, and has, completely clown Spider-Man in a few seconds. But for this story, I think it makes sense. That's always been my opinion, I think, on it. And what do you think? Tell me in the comments. Give me feedback. And that's the original cover. Yeah, that's a nice cover, but I think this grabs you more. Man, I miss just being able to pick up a new old issue. I like the reprint series so much. Oh, wow, there you go. I think I was already kind of maybe having trouble keeping up with all of the Midnight Suns books by this time. I don't know if I bought this Blaze limited series, even though, it's got Howard Mackey, but Ron Wagner. Ron Wagner did some solid stuff for Ghost Rider. He wasn't the first artist on the title, but he did some good Good work with him. And the Game Genie. Wow, we thought the Game Genie could do anything. Oh, and there's one for the Game Gear. We thought the Game Genie could just like alter reality at a touch, and it didn't last. Like they didn't keep making them. They didn't make one for the PlayStation. RoboCop 3. I've never heard anyone say a good word about that movie. Oh, what are we doing on time? Oh, man, we have certainly wound our way through that. We've wound our way through the better part of an hour here already, although we did get interrupted a few times. Thank you very much. What else do we got here to look at? How about, as I intimated the other day, here's an issue of Steel from early in the run. This is Louise Simonson, Chris Batista. Oh, John Bogdanovich, he's not being credited with co-plotting anymore. And like I say, I don't remember much about this series. I know that I bought it. It was only $1.50. It was back when you could, buy something that you sort of liked for the most part, because I do remember liking Chris Batista's art, and that probably would have been enough of a deciding factor. Come on. Besides the fact that I did like the character. We all like the character because he was really good in Reign of the Superman. That story really sold his character, sold Superboy's character. Oh, there's Muggsy Bogues for you. That's nice looking long hair Superman. That is not a mullet. Someone took issue with me saying that's not a mullet, but that isn't a mullet. A mullet is business in front. That is not business in front. He's got a full head of flowing hair. Oh, that's nice. See, that's a nice looking book. This Chris Batista fella, I looked. I actually did look. I was curious enough to go back and check. He kept working. I guess he never had a big breakout. But I remember thinking that he drew cute girls. And, it's a nice looking book. That's enough reason to buy any comic book, really, to this day. Blank Man. Maybe I want to see that again at some point. I don't really remember it very well, other than it being generally agreeable. There were a few, superhero movies around the time that sort of took off in the wake of Batman and didn't have any comic book antecedent. This was one, Meteor Man. I'm trying to think. There were a couple others. So they're referencing something that happened in the Worlds Collide crossover, which was the, I guess that was by then. That was the crossover between the Superman books and the Milestone books. And I didn't really follow any of the Milestone books that closely, so I only read half of the story. In hindsight, I realized, I probably should have been buying the Milestone books instead of, the late 30s of Darkhawk. But you don't know what's going to be good at the time when you're a kid. However, this is a nice-looking book. Nice domestic stuff. I don't remember anything about this drama. He's got family drama. His daughter eventually ends up being a hero. Oh, goodness, they're selling something to do with selling street drugs of some kind. Nice looking book, though. Very easy to read. Oh, the Superman Hunter Prey. We're going to do that. We're going to be doing that at some point. Maybe not soon, but at some point we're going to do that on the TikTok channel because I love this story. I love it. Superman Hunter Prey. One of my favorite Superman stories. Oh, they were still pushing Hawkman. But this run, Steve Lieber. Steve Lieber doing Hawkman with William Messner Loebs. Maybe it's better than you might remember. I don't know. We looked at an issue of Hawkman the other day, and I couldn't stop snapping on the guy the whole time. I'm sorry. I can't follow you there. If you're a Hawkman person, I like the JSA. He's fine in the JSA. But you try to sell me Hawkman on his... See, Hawkman is that disquieting a presence for me. You can just completely put me off of this steel. But it's a nice looking comic book. Something's happening to your dude. His jets are cut off. Oh, I don't know what's going on here. I don't think these guys ever did anything else. But they mean bad news for Steel at the moment. You know, bad guys just appear sometimes out of the... nice. Yeah, this is very readable. It doesn't particularly look that distinguished, certainly. Story-wise, you know what happens. I don't remember this book really, like I say, I don't remember it really catching fire. This, I remember I got, they actually put this trade paperback on newsstands. I remember I picked this one up at the supermarket. Happened every once in a while. DC did it. With some of their more, you know, mass market trade paperbacks. You know, they could have done more with it, but the newsstand was just, I mean, even by this time, 94, you know, it wasn't going to last another decade. Oh, there's 0 month, so that we're heading into 0 hour. I wrote an essay about 0 hour once. Putting the title of it up on the screen because I think it's one of my best, one of my favorite ones. All right, so it's, you know, he's taking on these goons and just there's your action. It's very nice, very nice. I can see why, you know, picking this up on a month-to-month basis, it looks nice enough to want to support it. This was there weren't that many Flash Elseworlds made. I think the Flash Annual 7 here was one of the only Flash Annuals, or one of the only Flash Elseworlds, and this is a very depressing one because Wally West is in a wheelchair, so it's very maudlin. So this one was more like a what if than an Elseworlds, if I recall correctly. Well, that's still a pretty big subscription form for a DSC book. Oh, see, you get nice pictures of your guy. Get lost, twerp. There is a word that only exists in comic books anymore. When was the last time you heard anyone called a twerp? Oh, wow. That Waringo Flash. Man, his Flash looked good. His Flash looked good. In hindsight, he didn't draw the book for that long, but he made an impact on the character. So, you see, it's perfectly readable. You know, in an environment where you can afford to, you know, have a few books that you buy just to, you know, sort of keep up on the family, you know, for $1.50. $1.50 a month, that's not that big of an investment. Now, you don't get to have that luxury today unless you're like a, you know, a dermatologist or something who's dropping $150 at the store every week. So the DC Universe page is just talking about 0 hour. And some sports cards. They were still sneaking in there in 94. Man, 1990, 91, that was where you saw the real ground zero for all of the sports cards ads. What do we got next? I think we have time for one more. I think. Okay, here's a strange one. Mike Danger from Tekno Comics. Who among ye remember Tekno Comics? I like Tekno Comics. I bought quite a few Tekno Comics. They did not have a good reputation. They were definitely considered a little bit down-rent somehow because they had first-rate creators, giving them IP for decent series. This is a Mickey Spillane character being written by Max Allan Collins with art by Eduardo Barreto and Steve Lealoha, and a Frank Miller cover. Now, every time I see this, I think to myself, could you have just not put the big swastika on the cover? Because this is a decent comic. I wouldn't mind having this on the TikTok channel, but I'm not putting that on the TikTok channel. That I don't think the algorithm would look kindly on that. Maybe just leave it off the big cover motif if it's not like a Captain America book. I don't know. So it's got a good not a good creative team. It's got an excellent creative team. Max Allan Collins, he wrote a lot of comic books. You probably don't remember how many comic books he wrote. He was the writer on Batman after year one. So the whole point of this character, this Mike Danger guy, is he's a 1940s style noir, hard-boiled guy who gets pulled into a sci-fi universe, which, if you think about it, that's actually a really solid premise. So you start off in this old-timey noir. You know, he's in his element as a PI back in the day. He's got a Gal Friday in a pink Angora sweater, and he's got a rakish scar on his face. But, you know, he sits in his office reading dime novels. So he's flashing back to the war and reading comic books during the war, which, you know, that's one reason why they published so many of those things, is they shipped them overseas to the GIs. And, you know, they fell apart and were thrown away when they were done with them, because that's how comic books were at the time. So there's a Buck Rogers for you. See? Nice looking stuff. They're talking about these weird fantasy science magazines. That looks a little bit like, you know, 1940s work. There's definitely some 1940s Kirby in that. Eduardo Barreto, he understood the assignment here. Ooh, that's nice. So if I recall correctly, the premise is a little bit like Futurama. Futurama would be a couple years after this. I'm not saying that this was the inspiration for Futurama by any means, but same basic deal. Dude stumbles onto some science experiment where some guy, not from our present, but from, you know, like 1940s, we're still in the 1940s, so there's something involving one of these this scientist guys. That's a nice spread. And so there's something going on here. We already know how it ends, though. This is just the origin story. So they're heading over here to see, you know, what happened to that guy. They're busting down doors. There's that guy. He means us no good. He shoots that guy. They find out, and it goes back to these coffins. So, there's visiting some guy in the mental hospital. But but that vivid imagination from which he earned his meager living fueled other sicker fantasies. In his paranoia, Mr. Gernsback even came to believe that I know this sounds ridiculous, some notorious Nazi mad doctor. Yeah, poor Lou was a few cards short of a deck. However, this guy here, it turns out, was just trying to put him off the scent, because when he goes back to look, see, you can follow this precisely. Eduardo Barreto, he just does not miss. Does not miss. When he goes back to investigate, this guy's waiting. He makes him, and there's DeFuhrer waiting to be thawed out. And so he's got a gun on him. He hits him, shot goes wild, the coffins explode. Oh, Dark Forces. I remember seeing the ads for that. Back when LucasArts was the going concern. So, there's a fire, and he's going to die, so he gets into one of these coffins. And then, I could tell I'd had a good long sleep, but where the hell was I? And just how long had I been sleeping? And there you go. That's where you get your spread from. See, that's not a bad comic book. That's a fun setup for a comic book. I remember I bought a few issues of this because it looked nice. Who did the colors on this? Alex Wade, color designer. Tony Kelly and Kello Graphics, computer colors. See, this was when the colorist would have like 3 or 4 credited names. Here's your Star Trek telephone cards. Back when collectible telephone cards were very, very briefly a thing. And here's see, the story is that this Mike Dangerfella, he was actually a Mickey Spillane character. His name isn't just up there for shits and giggles. He was a real Mickey Spillane character who is being given these new adventures on Tekno Comics. I don't think it lasted too long because Tekno Comics didn't last long. They had this Leonard Nimoy idea, but most of what they were pulling from was actually ended up being the Neil Gaiman, the Mystery Hero, and this character here who was really cool, called I think who was the Technophage, who was just this reptilian villain guy who was trying to take over the multiverse. So, it was one of those things, but it was pretty good. Science Fiction Book Club, which I joined a couple times because you got these wonderful, wonderful omnibus editions that weren't available anywhere else. But I have an omnibus edition of the Book of the New Sun from Gene Wolfe, and they never did any other, I think, 1-volume omnibus. It's fantastic. One of my most prized possessions. And so they had a John Jakes sci-fi book, if you remember who John Jakes is. Oh, there's another Neil Gaiman book, Lady Justice, who had some Dan Brereton art on it, non-code approved. I can't remember how much of Lady Justice I got. I liked Mr. Hero. I think I got most of the run from Mr. Hero. There was another of the mini Gene Roddenberry IP that wasn't Star Trek. There were a few of those. Technophage. And the John Jakes Mulcon Empire. I think I only bought one issue of the Mulcon Empire because it wasn't doing it for me. Oh, Tekno Comics Fan Club. Boca Raton. There you go. Created by comics legend Neil Gaiman. Not code approved. Techno Hotline. NASDAQ? These guys were on the NASDAQ? Big entertainment. Well, I guess they were. All right, well, that's a good pile of comics. Have a nice day. Check out my Patreon, please. Go onto my Patreon. There's a free download, 20,000 words of my music writing right now, available for you on the Patreon. All you got to do is sign up for the free tier of the Patreon. Check out my Instagram and TikTok channel. I make constant allusion to it here. It's where I put daily comic book reviews. I review all kinds of books. I tend to steer in the direction of Marvel and DC because I know what my audience likes, but I try to cover a bunch of different stuff on there. What else? I got a podcast that's called Udder Madness. We talk about, me and Claire Napier, we talk about Top Cow Comics. That's Witchblade, The Darkness, Mark Silvestri, Michael Turner, all that good stuff. We're on YouTube. Got videos up here right now for you to click over to. I just, not that long ago, put up a video annotations of our conversation on The Darkness. That's fun if you haven't watched it yet. What else? I put up something just about every week at the Comics Journal. A review of some kind. I put up a big article about Batman Year One a couple weeks ago. I'm very proud of it. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. And, you know, if you want to support these videos, please tell your friends. Distribute the links on your social media so that people know to watch the show, so that I can, know to do more of them. Show your support at the Patreon. That's how I know that people like what they're watching. What else? That's probably it for today. Have a wonderful day. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to your friends. Be kind to your lovers, small children, animals. Be kind to the earth. Just be well and have a wonderful day.